Folks, we are in for a special treat. If you are a follower of One Rental at a Time, and specifically somebody who goes through the comments, we're going to be discussing with someone who is an amazing contributor to One Rental at a Time. He has posted some of the most thought-provoking and complete comments. We must all appreciate what he does for this channel. And we're lucky enough to speak with Raul today. How you doing, Raul?
I'm doing great, and it's always been great to see that you reply to all the comments in there. So I really appreciate it.
I'm a channel of size where I am still the only individual that replies. I'm sometimes a little short, which can be taken as one way or the other, but I certainly try. So I keep going. But I really love, Raul, what you put out there because A, you don't always agree with me, which I think is awesome. B, you go deeper with some things that I are shallow on, which I appreciate. We'll see that in video 2 and 3. So I just wanted you to know, from me to you, I appreciate you, and I'm sure the people that go through the comments appreciate you. And you made a special offer to Beth. Her husband's been through some stuff, and Beth let me know privately that she was shocked at what you offered. So I just want you to know that Beth was very appreciative. But Raul, before we get started, who is Raul? What do you do? Let's get you introduced to the audience in a bigger, respect.
Yeah, I started commenting on your videos because I always wanted to share a little bit of my insight, my perspective on my journey. And one of the reasons why I thought it would be useful to share a little bit of my history over here is so that I can share some of the learnings I had in the early stages of my getting into the financial freedom journey. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when people learn about or get into investing, it's either because something happened to them or someone they know, or just with the people they hang out with. I got into it because something happened to me. So when I was 18, my dad passed away. And when he did, we started, and my mom was not working at that time. So we were trying to figure out how are we going to, where's the money going to come from? So we were talking about things like passive income. I didn't know these terms at that time, but they would ask like, so now who's going to make the money? Where's the money going to come from? And then there would be questions about, do you have any savings? So there was topics around what is your net worth? Like those are the kind of things that I started thinking about. And what we realized was that a lot of the things that my dad did in terms of investing, we didn't even know what they were. My mom was not into investing. And so we had to go look up all the records and stuff like that, transaction and statements and things like that, to figure out and piece together all the things that we had at that time. Okay. So I think one of the lessons I learned at that time is always document what you have, so that if something happens to you, other people in your family can easily know and get like records of what you have, what you own, and where you stand.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I found out was that we did own a property that my dad had bought. Wow. So my dad used to actually move from city to city every 2 to 3 years. So I was sort of like a nomad. So I didn't even know in his hometown, he bought a lot of land. And like Dion talks about drawing concentric circles to tell you find some place that you can afford and has got good value. He ended up buying it a few concentric circles outside the city. And so we said that for us to be able to cut down the cost of housing, it's probably best that we construct over there. So my mom found a contractor, and I said, I'll help her out. Even though I was young, I would be like, I'm ready to help you out in figuring out how to go about this process. She did most of the work, but I got to learn from that experience and visit the site and things like that.
So I'm curious, was this in the United States or was this somewhere else in the world?
Yeah, I should have started with that. I grew up in India, so this is in India.
But it's funny how that story, it's not, I guess the story's not funny, but it's when you look back at it, that could have been India, it could have been the United States, it could have been anywhere. Right? The framework of this is still valid. And the other thing I think that's really interesting that I would recommend people do today is talk about money. Right. The fact that your mom, stay-at-home mom, doing all that great stuff, didn't know that you own properties and didn't know these other things. We could be better than that. I think talking with your spouse about what's going on, not only documenting so you can go find it in the case something bad happens, but having to be a part of it, at least at some level, I think is important.
Yeah, and another thing that I learned from that experience was that I don't want to be in the same situation when I turned 50. Like when he passed away, it was just before he had turned 50. So I
Oh,
had said that,
wow.
so I had decided when I turn 50, I want to make sure that there's enough money for my kids to go to college. There is enough passive income. So those are the kind of things that it was not all crystallized in my mind immediately, but over the next few years, it started making sense to me.
Okay.
And so one of the things that I figured out is that I was actually studying engineering, and so and software engineering. So I was like, there's this great opportunity to come to US and make some good bucks, because my first job right out of college used to pay me like 3,000 rupees, which is like $100 a month. So I was like,
You're not going to be making big moves on 3,000 rupees.
yes. So then I decided that I'll follow my passion, come to the US, make some decent amount of money. And so that's what I ended up doing. And in the first 3 months, I ended up being really, really frugal, staying with other roommates and taking buses to go to the work, like not spending any, like making some lavish expenses. And then I sent that first batch of money to my mom so she could buy a car. And so now
Nice.
her transportation costs were taken care of, her housing costs was taken care of, and my dad was getting a pension. So now she was almost financially free.
That's nice. So you were 18 when this unfortunate event happened. When did you land in the United States? Were you like 23, 24?
Around 22, 23.
Okay, 23. Okay. All right. Very cool.
So I landed here, and then it was during the whole .com, and I think and now I think there's going to be some interesting comparisons about your journey and mine, because after I saved the first bunch of money and gave it to my mom, so she was in a good state. I started saving money for investing in the stock market.
Sure.
And then my net worth at that time was $1,500. So I put all of it in the stock market, lost 40%. And I think that's the similar story that you had. Like you lost a bunch of money in the first.
Yeah, I think my story is even worse because unfortunately I took 7 grand, turned it into 200 grand,
Oh, wow.
and then lost 80% of it. So yeah. Yeah, I was still up, but I got to tell you, I don't feel that way. All I remember was the 200 and I was not up.
But one thing that came out of it was I felt like I did something wrong because I didn't invest it properly. Yeah. So I doubled down on reading and learning about the stock market. And I read a lot.
I did the exact opposite thing. I got burned and said, I'm not touching this casino. This casino is rigged. I don't know the rules. I'm going somewhere else, and found real estate. This is going to be really interesting because in one of the next conversations, we'll dig into this more. And again, people can look at your comments. You're very articulate on how you put out your thoughts. So your research in depth is clearly paying off. So great work.
Thank you. Thank you. So I read I read like 50 books or something like that, some on personal finance, some on different things. And I ended up reading one book on technical analysis, and that changed things for me.
Do you happen to remember which one? Sorry.
It was one of those dummy books, probably, like how to get started with technical. There were actually a few. Okay. But I think it's not so important on learning all the complicated aspects, because technical analysis can be very deep. I started with very simple concepts like just moving averages, trend lines. And I also read upon when you're getting started, there's something called the S curve of learning, where there is your at bottom, you're at ignorance, and then as you learn, you reach mastery. So I was at ignorance. And at that stage, I knew that I should be very safe. And so I ended up doing dollar cost averaging into ETFs.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
So that's how I started. And then once I started, once I built a little bit of success, then I started saying that, okay, now I can try individual stocks. And then, so I started buying Amazons and Microsoft.
Now, how long was that? Because again, I think a lot of people rush that step. Again, you come into this very conservative after suffering losses. Yeah. You're doing ETFs and dollar cost averaging, which is probably is the least risky. How long did it take before you were buying individual stocks again? A year, 2 years? What's going on?
Yeah, about 2 years, but there were like 3 stages even to get there. The first one was just dollar cost averaging into the ETFs. Okay. And for people who don't know about dollar cost averaging, it's like the same amount of dollar you're spending at a fixed amount of time. So when I started learning technical analysis, I made a little tweak to it. So I started putting the same amount of dollars, but only when they were dipping. And so when it was touching the
buying on red days.
So that way, so I was started to get into the timing of it a little bit.
Okay.
And then when I saw that that was getting me results better than the index, then I said, okay, now it's time to start picking some individual stocks. And that was about 2 years later. And even when that happened, I didn't go immediately full on into that. Like I would put 80% in ETFs and 20% in individual.
I like it. You are, since being burned, you're controlling risk.
Yeah.
I like that. Okay. So you double down on stocks, you get better at that. You realize you were gambling when you started. When do you pivot and start adding real estate? Because that's one thing I've seen in your comments. You are articulate on both fronts. Not many people are. Some people you can tell are deep stocks, shallow real estate. Others are deep real estate, shallow stocks. You seem to be able to go both pretty well. When did that happen?
So like I said, I'd come into 1999, December, and then by about 2002, 2003, I was getting good success with my stocks. So I started accruing some amount of money that I was thinking of, like, is this the only place I want to stay in, or do I want to go somewhere else, invest somewhere else? And I also had some experience building that house in India. So I had some experience with real estate. So I said, I want to buy a house here. I don't want to rent forever.
And here is California?
And this was in the Bay Area, and
Okay.
I couldn't afford anything. So I said that it's going to be hard for me to purchase a house here with the amount of money I had. So I ended up investing in India in another property. And this was in 2004.
Okay.
And the idea was that I would generate income from there, and that would help me pay off some of my rent over here. It cannot completely pay it off, but at least it will start helping me reduce the amount of expenses that I have that I can accrue towards my first home.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question about it, because I've never obviously bought homes in India. Can you get loans, or does this have to be cash, or how does that all work there?
Yeah, you can get loans. And at that time, I had one of the lowest interest rates, which was more than 7%. So the rates there are higher. And yeah, but you do get loans. I know that I've also looked at purchasing properties in other places like Mexico and Costa Rica, like much later on in my financial journey. And there you have to pretty much pay the full entire
and you don't
amount.
like in Mexico, you don't actually own the land, right? It's kind of it's a very different animal. All right, so were the loans very, like 30-year fixed or 5 years? I have no idea what a loan structure might be in India.
It was the one I took was 15 years.
Okay, that's not bad. All right, so you had a long duration. It wasn't like 90-day debt or something silly.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So where do you go from there?
I kept investing in the stock market. I kept saving money from reducing my expenses in any way I could. And then in 2008, when the financial drop happened, I decided to purchase my first home, my primary residence.
Okay. Was that in California? Had you moved by then?
That was still in California. I'm still in California. So the same location for the past 20 years or so.
Very, very cool. So you take the opportunity. This is fun, right? So you see the run up, you see the crash. Bay Area, I don't remember the Bay Area. It certainly fell. Maybe 20% peak to trough. Again, I don't remember the Bay Area back then.
Yeah, I think it depends on location to location. So I am like in the heart of the peninsula of Bay Area. So it's like almost equidistant from San Francisco and San Jose.
Oh, okay, I know where you are. Yeah.
So this is a location where you have lesser drops.
Yeah.
So
there's just no land, right? It's okay.
But if you go to like across the bridge, go to Hayward, there, I think the houses would drop even 50% around that time.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
So I felt about 15 or 20% drop in that range. And when everybody was scared, I jumped in.
I did the same. I bought everything I could. It was like, you guys are silly to be running away. It's time to go. It's time to go. So that's awesome. I like it. Again, knowledge, experience. What that really teaches you, right? I call it doing the work. You've obviously heard me say that. Yeah. Really what doing the work means to me, and it'd be interesting if you agree or disagree, is really it's a confidence builder. You shouldn't be gambling. You're looking at odds. And when you do the work, you can identify at least increased opportunity for success. And if you don't do the work, it's always gambling, right? I'm feeling this way. That's why I don't do stocks, because I allow my feelings to get in. but why I do real estate, because I'm so numbers oriented. It's just a wild dichotomy in my silly brain that doesn't let me do well in stocks. What do you think of doing the work? Is it a confidence builder, or is there something else there?
I think there's no other way around it. In fact, when I was young, I used to go and play a lot of different sports. And one of the things I did was learning how to dive. I think gravity works for everybody else. You can splash and fall, do a belly flop, or you can go like cut the water in like a great dive. So it's like whether you can control yourself in the air. Like gravity works for everybody. So I think of it
works
like
for
that.
Everybody. I like that.
If you do a lot of practice, when things happen, you feel like you're more in control of the different outcomes. When something goes wrong, you can pivot easily. So you should absolutely be prepared getting into it and doing it several times, getting enough reps.
Yeah. The other thing we'll close out episode 1 with, this has been so much fun. I'm enjoying this show so much, is I want to know when you got into short-term rentals, because one of the areas you have been gracious enough to contribute to is thoughts on short-term rentals, because, and we'll get deeper on this in video too, but when did you get in?
I told you that I bought my house in 2008. I ended up selling it in 2018, and so that I could upgrade to another house. And I took all the equity out of it, and then I invested it in one short-term rental in Hawaii, and that was successful. And then so I ended up getting a second one in January of this year.
So your first one was 2018. That was a house?
It was not 2018. I actually took a little time figuring out where I wanted to invest that money. I didn't jump into short-term rental right away. But once we get into that video, maybe I can talk about how I got into short-term rental.
Very cool. Well, again, this is a lot of fun. Again, there's so much opportunity. What I'm taking from this conversation is, where your weaknesses are, or at least opportunities to learn. You're disciplined, which is a superpower, and you're willing to act on imperfect information. Right. Yeah. Which is pretty awesome. Where can people find you, and where can they maybe see these short-term rentals that you own?
Yeah, you can search by my name, Rahul Punekar, on different social media. So if you're on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, you can find me using that name. I'm always lurking on your videos, leaving comments. People can definitely reach out to me on YouTube. That's awesome. I have my short-term rental websites, the MauiRental.com and the BigIslandBeachHouse.com. So you can reach out to me over there as well.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to those websites and see what this guy has. I know you are too. One more time, what are those websites?
The BigIslandBeachHouse.com and the MauiRental.com.
Thank you, buddy.